I still remember the day the world I knew shattered into 1,000 splintered pieces. I'd woken up to a quiet, almost deceptive calm in our dream house. A house that we had both labored for, poured our sweat and hopes into. Yet that morning, an unsettling chill crept over me as I discovered that the sanctuary we had built was about to become the stage for my wife's ultimate betrayal. I'd always known deep down that Mara wasn't entirely honest with me, but nothing could have prepared me for the revelation that followed. It started with a cryptic voicemail left on my cell phone, a garbled message from an unknown number, hinting at a transaction and a clandestine meeting. My blood ran cold as I pieced together the clues. Mara had sold our house for a laughably low sum of $20, and the buyer wasn't some desperate soul but her own lover. A man who had slithered into our lives with a sickening charm, his intentions as dark as Mara's hidden smiles. In that moment, my mind filled with a cold, unyielding resolve. I was betrayed not just in love, but in every dream I had ever shared with her. Mara had always been the epitome of charm on the surface, radiant, articulate, and supremely confident. But beneath that glossy veneer, I'd come to see her as a manipulative force. Over the years, her words had dripped with a subtle, venomous deceit. She'd lie effortlessly, her tone always laced with condescension, treating my concerns with a dismissive arrogance. I'd been nothing more than a pawn in her game, and now the final, unforgivable act was laid bare. To think that she would sell the very home that bore witness to our shared past, a home that was meant to be our legacy. For a paltry $20, it was a statement, a declaration of how little our marriage had ever meant to her. I had spent countless nights piecing together the puzzle, retracing every step, every whispered conversation, every hidden meeting. The truth was as sharp as a knife's edge. Mara had not only betrayed me emotionally, but she had also gambled away our future without a shred of remorse. The cruelty was staggering. With a chilling clarity, I realized that every insult, every rude remark she'd ever flung my way had been a prelude to this final act of treachery. As I stared at the peeling wallpaper in the study, the room where Mara had once declared her love in theatrical fervor, I felt something harden within me. I had become a man reborn, forged in the icy fires of betrayal. My heart, once filled with dreams of a future together, now beat with the singular purpose of retribution. I began planning my revenge, a meticulous and calculated response to her duplicity. I would not merely break her heart. I would dismantle the very essence of her existence, piece by piece. I remember the first moment I decided that cold-blooded justice was the only path forward. It was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but the culmination of every hurtful word she'd uttered, every deceptive smile, and every time she'd made me feel less than the man I was. The plan took shape in the shadows of my mind, growing more intricate with each detail I recalled. I would expose her lies to the world in a way so brutal that there would be no room for her charade to survive. I envisioned every twist and turn, her smug confidence crumbling before the unyielding force of truth and my unwavering resolve. Even now, as I write these words, I can hear the echoes of Mara's dismissive laughter, her airy tone as she once brushed aside my suspicions. She had been nothing but a con artist in disguise, a bitch who reveled in deceit and used her wiles to manipulate those who trusted her. The taste of betrayal was bitter, yet it steeled my resolve. I was not a man to be trifled with, and her arrogance had sealed her fate. In the coming days, I would set into motion a series of events so relentless and merciless that even the shadows would tremble. I wanted her to suffer not just the sting of exposure, but to experience a retribution that was as brutal and unyielding as the betrayal itself. And so, with every calculated breath I took, I began to draft the blueprint of her undoing. A masterpiece of revenge destined to be executed with a precision that mirrored my newfound clarity and confidence. As the sun set on that fateful day, painting the sky with hues of blood and fire, I felt a cold determination settling over me. I was no longer the victim of her lies, but the architect of her downfall. The first steps had been taken, and soon, every secret, every insult, and every act of betrayal would be laid bare for all to see. This was just the beginning of a dark journey, a journey that would lead to the brutal, unrelenting retribution she so richly deserved. In the days that followed my revelation, I set my plan into relentless motion. Every movement I made was calculated, every breath measured. As I began the slow, meticulous dismantling of Mara's carefully constructed world, the knowledge that she had so casually betrayed our shared history, our dreams and sacrifices, fueled a fire inside me, one that demanded not just retribution, but a complete eradication of her deceitful influence. I started by gathering evidence, meticulously combing through our past correspondence, financial records, and even the casual remarks she'd made at gatherings. Each piece of information, however small, painted a clearer picture of the web of lies she had spun. I discovered that Mara's charade extended far beyond our marital confines. She had been involved in dubious financial schemes and secret deals, her charm masking a ruthless ambition that knew no bounds. Every document I uncovered was a silent testament to her duplicity. Late one night, while poring over old bank statements in our study, a room that still held echoes of what once was our sanctuary, I found a series of transactions that pointed to a secret account, one that Mara had used to siphon funds into unknown channels. With this damning evidence in hand, I knew that exposing her double life would be the first step in unraveling her entire facade. But I also knew that for my plan to work, I needed allies. Allies who could help me amplify the truth, ensuring that the world would see her true colors. I reached out to a trusted old friend, Vincent, who had once served as an investigative journalist with a penchant for uncovering the darkest secrets of high society. Vincent, a man as unyielding in his pursuit of justice as I was in my quest for retribution, agreed to meet me in a discreet, dimly lit diner on the edge of town. Over cups of bitter coffee, I laid out the incriminating evidence, transactions, secret meetings, whispered exchanges. Vincent's eyes widened with a mix of shock and anticipation as he realized the magnitude of the scandal he was about to uncover. "This will rock the foundations of every institution you thought was untouchable," he murmured, his voice low and laden with a promise of the impending storm. But my plans were not solely about exposing her lies. They were also about ensuring that Mara would feel every ounce of the pain she had inflicted on me. I began to subtly sabotage her meticulously maintained social image. At the local charity gala, an event where Mara's presence was as much a performance as it was a social obligation, I ensured that whispers of her hidden misdeeds were spread like wildfire. In hushed conversations among the elite, hints of her financial indiscretions and personal betrayals began to circulate. Her polished veneer started to crack as doubts and suspicions took root in the minds of those who once idolized her. As the days turned into nights, my plan advanced with the precision of a well-oiled machine. I manipulated schedules, orchestrated meetings, and even arranged for encounters between Vincent and key figures in our community, all while keeping a low profile. Every step was a calculated move in a dangerous game of chess, and I was playing with an unwavering confidence. My mind was as sharp as the edge of a freshly honed blade, slicing through the pretense of Mara's fabricated world. Yet, even as I reveled in the slow disintegration of her empire, I couldn't shake the lingering sting of her personal betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her dismissive smirk and heard her flippant remarks, as if my pain were nothing more than an inconvenient side note in her relentless pursuit of self-interest. That memory, the image of her turning away from me with a casual arrogance, served as a constant reminder that I owed her no mercy. And so, as I advanced my dual campaign of public exposure and personal vindication, I started receiving subtle, almost imperceptible signals that Mara was aware of something amiss. A nervous glance in the mirror, a forced smile during an otherwise gleeful social interaction, small cracks in her previously unbreakable facade. I found satisfaction in these moments. They were the first signs that my meticulously orchestrated plan was having its intended effect. But then, just as I felt I was one step ahead, an unexpected twist emerged. Late one rainy evening, while reviewing new evidence from a source I'd kept anonymous, I discovered a detail that made my blood run cold. Mara had been careful to cover her tracks, but a single misstep revealed a connection to a larger conspiracy. Her financial dealings weren't just about a secret escape. They hinted at a network of accomplices who stood to gain from her betrayals. This wasn't merely a personal vendetta. This was a multi-layered game of corruption and ambition, and I had inadvertently become a player on a much larger stage. This revelation forced me to rethink my strategy. The stakes were now higher, and the enemy more formidable than I had ever imagined. But it also filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. If Mara had dared to betray me on such a grand scale, then she was prepared to risk everything. And I was determined to ensure that every piece of her treachery, no matter how deeply hidden, would be exposed to the light of day. Every twist in the labyrinth of her deceit only deepened my resolve. I was no longer just a scorned husband seeking revenge. I had become the instrument of a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of her entire world. I felt the surge of cold-blooded determination, each new piece of evidence a step closer to the moment when I would stand over the ruins of her life, confident that she had finally paid the price for every lie, every slight, every act of betrayal. I realized with a shock that Mara's treachery was not an isolated incident. It was the tip of an iceberg that threatened to drown us both in deceit and corruption. In that cold, rain-soaked night when I uncovered the conspiracy, I knew that the final act of retribution would require me to face not only my unfaithful wife, but also the cadre of unsavory accomplices who had profited from her lies. Every revelation sharpened my determination, fueling a fire that burned with the icy promise of retribution. My plan had already set in motion a series of events that destabilized Mara's carefully constructed life. Now, I turned my full attention to dismantling the network of criminals that had hidden behind her back. I started by infiltrating the dark corners of the city where whispered transactions and clandestine meetings took place. Each step into that underworld was both dangerous and exhilarating. An adrenaline-laced descent into a realm where loyalty was as fleeting as smoke and betrayal was the currency. Under the guise of anonymity, I arranged meetings with contacts who had been burned by Mara's machinations before. One such meeting took place in a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of town. In the dim light of a single, swinging bulb, I met with a nervous man whose eyes darted about like frightened prey. He revealed that Mara's secret account was only a fraction of a far larger scheme. A network that funneled money from high-level scams and illegal deals into offshore accounts. Every detail he provided was a new brick in the towering monument of her deceit. Armed with this new information, I began constructing a labyrinthine trap. I knew that exposing her financial corruption publicly would be one matter, but making sure that she and her accomplices paid the ultimate price required a far more personal approach. I orchestrated a series of meetings, each more carefully designed than the last, where I lured her confidence into a false sense of security. In whispered exchanges over midnight rendezvous and in cryptic messages sent via burner phones, I slowly corralled the pieces of her treacherous puzzle. The network that once made her untouchable was beginning to crumble, and every revelation added to the mounting pressure on her. As I advanced, my mind was relentlessly consumed by the image of Mara, once the dazzling, arrogant center of my life, now reduced to a desperate, cornered animal. Her arrogance had blinded her, and in her final, futile attempt to hide behind layers of lies, she grew reckless. I began to receive subtle, yet unmistakable signals that she sensed my presence. Her eyes, once cool and dismissive, now flickered with a dangerous anxiety whenever we crossed paths at those same charity galas and upscale parties. It was as if she knew that her carefully curated facade was crumbling, and I was the hammer she had unwittingly invited into her world. Late one evening, as I watched her from a safe distance outside a lavish party, I saw the glint of panic in her eyes, a glimpse of the terrified truth. The woman who had once exuded confidence now moved with a jittery urgency, as though she could feel the noose tightening around her. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Every moment of her unease was a testament to the slow, inexorable progress of my plan. But the final act was yet to come. I began meticulously planning the confrontation. It had to be both public and personal, a spectacle that would ensure that no one could ever deny the full extent of her treachery. I arranged a meeting with her in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of town. I chose this location deliberately. Its desolation mirrored the void of morality that had replaced her once vibrant soul, and it would serve as the perfect stage for the reckoning. As I drove there under the cloak of night, my pulse was steady, my mind focused on every detail. I knew that when the time came, I would confront her with the full force of my carefully gathered evidence, and I would do so with the cold, ruthless precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. In that grim arena of rusted metal and decaying concrete, I found Mara waiting. She appeared smaller than I remembered, her once imposing presence reduced to a frantic vulnerability. For a brief moment, I saw the woman behind the mask, a person haunted by her own choices. But that image was quickly swallowed by the bitter taste of betrayal, and my resolve hardened into something unyielding. I stepped forward, my voice low and controlled. Mara, you've built your life on lies. Tonight, every deceit, every betrayal, every stolen dream is coming back to haunt you. Her eyes widened, a cocktail of fear and indignation flashing across her face. You're insane, she spat, her voice trembling as she attempted to mask the terror underlying her tone. But there was no room for denial now. In that moment, as I unveiled the damning evidence, a series of incriminating bank transfers, secret emails, and recorded conversations, the full scope of her double life was laid bare. The weight of her lies fell like a guillotine around her neck. The confrontation escalated quickly. She attempted to feign innocence, her voice rising in desperate protest, but every word was drowned out by the relentless barrage of truth. And then, in a twist I hadn't fully anticipated, one of her accomplices emerged from the shadows, a man whose presence confirmed the extent of her betrayal. His eyes met mine with a cold defiance, and I knew that the final showdown was inevitable. In that desolate space, surrounded by the relics of forgotten industry and shattered dreams, I realized that I had become an instrument of cold-blooded justice, a force that would not rest until every last remnant of her treachery was erased. The final chapter of her deception was about to be written in blood, and I was the unyielding hand that would deliver the coup de grace. The tension in the abandoned complex reached a fever pitch as the night deepened, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed off the rusted steel beams. In that barren arena, I had orchestrated a showdown that was as much about unveiling Mara's lies as it was about exacting my own brand of cold, unyielding justice. After exposing her duplicity with the damning evidence, I stepped forward and watched her composure shatter. The man from the shadows, one of her accomplices, had revealed himself, but I had anticipated every move. With a swift, decisive gesture, I neutralized him, ensuring that he would be unable to serve as a shield for her any longer. The final confrontation was mine to command. Mara, I said, my voice low and laced with an emotion that was as icy as it was resolute. This is not merely about betrayal. It's about consequences. Every lie, every deceit, it all ends tonight. I advanced, each step deliberate, my eyes fixed on hers. In that moment, I was no longer the man who had once loved you. I was a force, resolute and merciless, fueled by the countless nights of planning and the searing pain of your betrayal. Your eyes darted around, desperate for an escape, but there was none. The derelict structure bore witness to our fate. I retrieved from my coat a small, black case, a tool for the final act of reckoning. Inside lay the instruments that I had painstakingly acquired, tools that would turn my calculated plan into a brutal reality. With each measured movement, I reminded myself that every cruelty you had inflicted on me was coming back full circle. You tried to speak, your voice a strangled whisper of defiance and fear. I never meant. You began, but your words were cut off by the cold sound of steel meeting flesh. I struck with a precision that betrayed months of careful planning, delivering blows that were as swift as they were unrelenting. Every impact was a punctuation mark in the long, dark sentence of our shared history, a history that you had rewritten with lies and infidelity. In the chaos of that moment, I unleashed the full force of my pent-up fury. I was methodical in my assault, first disarming you of any semblance of power, then forcing you to confront every terrible decision that had led us here. The sound of your gasps and the echo of shattering dreams mingled with the relentless patter of rain on the corrugated metal roof above us. I made sure that every blow was deliberate, every action a final chapter in the story you had so carelessly authored. But even as the violence raged, the twists of fate continued to unveil themselves. Amid the struggle, the man I had earlier subdued rose with a snarl of defiance. He lunged forward, attempting to aid you, but I was prepared for him too. In a brutal display of strength and determination, I dispatched him with the same cold efficiency. It wasn't personal, just the inexorable logic of retribution. Each of you had played your part in the grand betrayal, and neither of you would leave unscathed. As the rain blurred the lines between reality and nightmare, I paused, if only for a moment, to look into your eyes. They were wide with terror and regret, a window into the soul of someone who had once been so full of pretension and cruelty. In that fleeting moment, I wondered if there had ever been a time when I truly cared for you. But that thought was swiftly drowned by the memory of every lie, every stolen dream, every day I had lived under the weight of your falsehoods. With grim resolve, I reminded myself that this was the culmination of everything, the final act of a twisted drama in which I was both victim and executioner. I spoke again, my tone unyielding. You made your choices, Mara. Now face the consequence. And with those words, I enacted the last phase of my plan, a final, irreversible measure to erase the person you had become. In the flickering gloom of that forsaken place, I administered my cold-blooded justice with a brutal clarity that left no room for mercy. The intricate plan I had devised was complete, every element falling perfectly into place. The world, once dazzled by your charm and deception, would soon learn the true cost of your treachery. As I stood amidst the ruin of that night, every echo of pain and every shattered illusion coalesced into a single, searing truth. You betrayed me, and now, you were paying the ultimate price. In that moment of finality, the man you once knew was no more. A new force had risen, one that would ensure that the legacy of your lies would never again hold dominion over the lives you had so callously upturned. In the aftermath of that grim confrontation, the torrential rain washed away the last vestiges of our former lives as I staggered away from the wreckage of shattered glass and broken dreams. The echo of my own footsteps on the cold, cracked concrete was the only companion to my relentless thoughts. For a fleeting moment, I paused to catch my breath, the bitter tang of adrenaline still mixing with the metallic scent of blood and rainwater. I believed that the final act of vengeance had been executed flawlessly, that Mara's carefully constructed web of deceit had been torn asunder by my own unyielding resolve. But fate, ever capricious, had more twists in store. As I retreated into the obscurity of the night, my mind reeled with the raw intensity of what had just transpired. My fury had been an instrument, precise, brutal, and unsparing. Yet, buried beneath the satisfaction of retribution, I sensed a disquiet that would not abate. The taste of victory was tainted by the nagging awareness that Mara was not entirely the architect of her own downfall. In the final moments at that forsaken complex, as she lay bleeding and barely conscious, I distinctly heard her rasp, "I never meant for it to go this far." Words that, though feeble, hinted at an ulterior truth. I pressed on, driven by the need to unravel every last secret that had fueled our tragic downfall. Later that night, I returned to the scene, not to linger in the blood-soaked memories, but to search for clues. Among the scattered shards of evidence, a cell phone half buried in mud, a notebook with smeared ink, I discovered a series of encrypted messages. Their digital pulse whispered of a deeper conspiracy, a network that reached far beyond the petty betrayals of our marital life. It appeared that Mara had been ensnared in a web spun by forces far more insidious than our broken vows. And somewhere in that murky labyrinth, I suspected, lay the true puppeteers of her, and perhaps even my demise. The following morning, I enlisted the reluctant aid of Vincent, the old investigative friend whose reputation for unearthing scandal was as legendary as his moral ambiguity. Meeting in a deserted parking lot cloaked in early fog, I handed him the evidence I had salvaged. His eyes, once steeled against the world's corruption, widened with a mixture of shock and grim understanding. "This isn't just about a cheating wife or a ruined marriage," he murmured, scrolling through the digital files on his battered laptop. It's a fraction of a far larger criminal enterprise, one that uses personal tragedies as a smokescreen for embezzlement, money laundering, and power grabs in high society. A chill ran down my spine as Vincent's words echoed my deepest fears. Every calculated betrayal, every cold-hearted maneuver that I had endured and now reciprocated, had been but a pawn in a larger game. A game where the real players lurked behind gilded facades and velvet smiles. The more I probed, the more it became evident that Mara had been entangled in something she could neither control nor escape. And yet, in her desperate bid to free herself, she had chosen the path of deception, igniting a chain reaction that consumed us both. Haunted by this revelation, I began retracing every moment of our past. The clandestine meetings, the hurried phone calls, the barely concealed smirks, that now reassembled into a mosaic of calculated manipulation. Each memory, once dismissed as personal betrayal, was now imbued with the grim complexity of a larger conspiracy. I wondered if her arrogance had been a mask not only to hide her infidelities, but also to protect secrets that others would kill to keep buried. Despite this burgeoning web of intrigue, my thirst for revenge had not abated. My heart, still steeled by the cold precision of my earlier actions, demanded closure. I needed to force Mara's hand one last time, to confront her with the entirety of her guilt and the monstrous truth behind it. I arranged one final meeting at a decrepit safehouse on the edge of town, a place where the echoes of betrayal would resonate without interference. The night was oppressively silent when I arrived. Inside, dim light flickered over peeling walls and scattered remnants of forgotten lives. There, bruised and trembling, Mara awaited me. Her once defiant gaze had surrendered to despair, yet there remained a spark of defiance in the depths of her eyes, a spark that hinted at secrets she had long suppressed. I leaned in close, my voice a low growl heavy with contempt. Mara, tonight, you face not only the retribution you so rightfully deserve, but the truth behind every lie. Confess, who truly orchestrated this labyrinth of corruption? Who holds the reins that manipulated your every move? Her eyes darted to the encrypted messages clutched in my hand, and for a moment, the walls around her seemed to crumble. With a bitter laugh, she sneered, "You think you've won? You think by spilling your hatred and blood you can change the game? You're a fool if you believe you understand the forces at work." Her words were laced with a venom I had come to expect, but now they carried an undercurrent of desperation, as if she too was afraid of the true enemy. In that charged silence, as the distant wail of sirens merged with the beating of my heart, I realized that my personal vendetta was now irrevocably intertwined with a much larger, more dangerous scheme. The final twist lay just beyond my reach, one that promised to upend everything I thought I knew about betrayal, power, and retribution. With the weight of these revelations pressing upon me, I resolved that my mission was not yet over. I would delve deeper into this conspiracy, tear apart every layer of deceit until I exposed the puppeteers behind the charade. And as for Mara, her fate was sealed not by my hands alone, but by the machinations of a world far more treacherous than either of us had ever imagined. In that moment, I knew that the real reckoning was only just beginning. In the oppressive silence that followed our final confrontation at the safe house, I found myself trapped between two undeniable realities: the personal betrayal that had ignited my vengeance and the vast, sinister conspiracy that now threatened to engulf everything I thought I knew. My mind raced as I attempted to parse the layers of deception that had led us here, a labyrinth where every corner concealed yet another betrayal, every shadow hid another enemy. After Mara's half-hearted confession and the cryptic warnings of forces beyond our control, I left the decrepit safehouse with more questions than answers. The taste of blood and regret still clung to me like a second skin. But instead of retreating into the darkness of my shattered past, I resolved to press deeper into this unfolding nightmare. The deeper I went, the more I realized that my war with Mara was merely a diversion, a smokescreen for a criminal empire operating in the peripheries of power. I returned to Vincent's cramped apartment, a sanctum of old newspapers, yellowed files, and half-forgotten secrets, and laid out every scrap of evidence I had gathered. Vincent's eyes, weary from years of chasing scandal and corruption, flickered with renewed determination as he scanned the documents. "You're not just a victim of marital betrayal," he murmured, almost to himself. "This is a web of organized crime, money laundering, and political manipulation." Mara was a minor cog in a machine run by those who profit from the misery of others. Those words echoed in my mind as Vincent and I began connecting the dots. Every intercepted message, every suspicious financial transfer, and every clandestine meeting pointed to a network that spanned industries and crossed borders. I discovered that Mara's secret account was merely a drop in a pool of illicit funds siphoned off by an elite circle, individuals who operated behind the veneer of respectability, yet were masters of manipulation and greed. And somewhere in that murky expanse lay the mastermind, a shadowy figure known only by the codename Icarus. Determined to bring Icarus into the light, I embarked on a dangerous journey into the heart of the underworld. My investigation led me through a series of encounters with dubious informants, each more nervous than the last, each offering fragmented pieces of the puzzle. I began to frequent seedy bars and forgotten back alleys, trading favors and secrets in a language of whispered code and concealed glances. Every conversation was a risk, every meeting a step further into a realm where trust was as rare as genuine remorse. One chilly night, in an abandoned industrial district painted with the scars of forgotten factories, I met with a man known only as Raven. His reputation as a fixer for the underworld was legendary, someone who could procure anything from falsified documents to classified intel. Over a table scarred by time and neglect, Raven slid a battered envelope toward me. "Inside, you'll find names and transactions that lead straight to Icarus," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "But be warned, the closer you get, the more dangerous it becomes. They're watching, always watching." With the contents of that envelope in hand, I felt both the weight of destiny and the chill of impending doom. The list of names was unervingly long, each one a potential adversary, a member of the cabal that had orchestrated Mara's downfall and, by extension, manipulated countless lives. Yet amid the list, one name recurred with disquieting frequency, a name linked to vast wealth, political influence, and an uncanny ability to evade scrutiny. That name was whispered in hushed tones in the corridors of power: Alexander Hawke. My investigation revealed that Hawke's interests were as diverse as they were nefarious. From offshore accounts to hidden real estate empires, he was the puppet master of a shadow network that thrived on secrets and lies. And it seemed that Mara had been one of his many pawns, a woman ensnared in a game far larger than a simple marital betrayal. Her desperate attempts to break free had only served to tighten the noose around her neck, drawing her ever closer to the inevitable downfall orchestrated by Hawke's unseen hand. Haunted by the magnitude of what I had uncovered, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. I began a systematic campaign to expose the network, discreetly contacting former allies of Mara who had long suffered under Hawke's regime. As I pieced together testimonies and cross-referenced financial records, a disturbing pattern emerged. Every major scandal, every scandal that rocked the high echelons of society in recent years, bore the fingerprints of Hawke's machinations. But amidst this unraveling tapestry of corruption, my personal vendetta remained a burning ember at the core of my being. The memory of Mara's cold eyes, the disdain, the calculation, haunted me like a ghost. I could no longer separate the betrayal of our past from the larger web of deceit that now enveloped me. I needed to confront her again, not simply to extract a confession, but to force her to reveal the truth about Hawke and Icarus once and for all. I arranged another clandestine meeting with Mara, this time in a derelict hotel on the outskirts of town, a place where the weight of forgotten sins seemed to hang in the air. The corridors were silent, echoing with the ghosts of a bygone era, as I made my way to the room where she awaited me. The door creaked open to reveal her pale, haggard figure, a stark contrast to the confident woman I once knew. Her eyes, now devoid of their former arrogance, flickered with a mix of fear and resignation. "Mara," I began, my voice a blend of authority and barely suppressed fury, "you played your part in this charade long enough. It's time to tell me everything. Who is behind this network? Who is Icarus? And what is your connection to Alexander Hawk? Her eyes widened, and for a long moment, the silence between us was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Slowly, as if a dam had finally broken, she began to speak. Her words rushed, her voice trembling with a cocktail of remorse and defiance. "You think you understand, but you have no idea," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting dark figures to materialize in the shadows. "Hawk, Icarus, they're not just names. They're the architects of a system that feeds on corruption, on the suffering of the weak. I tried to escape, to rid myself of their grasp, but the deeper I went, the more entangled I became. Before I could press further, a sudden noise shattered the tense atmosphere. A muted crash from the hallway. The door burst open, and armed men clad in dark suits stormed into the room. In that instant, I realized that the net had finally closed around us. I instinctively ducked behind a battered desk as bullets ricocheted off the walls, the room erupting into chaos. The betrayal I had once felt now paled in comparison to the cold, calculated strike of these new adversaries. Their presence confirmed one chilling truth. I had stumbled into a realm far more perilous than I ever anticipated. As I clutched the envelope containing Raven's damning evidence, my heart pounded with both fear and determination. The true reckoning was at hand. I was not merely avenging a broken marriage. I was about to expose a conspiracy that had corrupted the very foundations of power. And as I prepared to fight my way out of this ambush, I vowed that I would not rest until every last member of this treacherous network was unmasked and brought to justice. In that electrifying moment, with bullets whizzing past and the cries of betrayal echoing in my ears, I embraced the chaos as a catalyst for the final battle. The game had changed, and now I was not only a scorned husband, but a relentless crusader for truth. The final showdown with Hawk, Icarus, and the Cabal was inevitable, and I was ready to wage war in the shadows. Chaos exploded around me. I dove behind the battered desk as the armed men, clad in dark suits and cold expressions, poured into the room like wolves on a hunt. Bullets shattered the stillness, ricocheting off metal and plaster. The room became a battleground of shrieking alarms, splintering wood, and the unmistakable staccato of gunfire. Heart pounding, I clutched Raven's envelope tightly, its contents a lifeline to the truth I sought. My training, or what little I had acquired in the darkest corners of the city's underbelly, kicked in. I rolled silently behind the desk, adrenaline sharpening my every sense. Each second stretched into an eternity as I planned my escape. I couldn't let them confiscate the evidence. I couldn't let this be the end. I peered around the desk and caught sight of Mara, slumped against a wall, her features contorted by fear and pain. For a fleeting moment, the personal vendetta I had nurtured wavered under the raw terror etched on her face. But there was no time for sentiment. This was war, and I was in the thick of it. Summoning every ounce of resolve, I sprang into action. I grabbed an overturned chair and hurled it toward one of the intruders. The impact sent him sprawling, a fleeting advantage in the midst of relentless assault. I darted toward the door, each step measured, yet fueled by a burning desire to survive and unearth the hidden truths that had led to this ambush. As I reached the threshold of the room, a searing pain exploded in my shoulder. A bullet had grazed me. I bit back a cry of agony, adrenaline muting the pain as I staggered into the narrow corridor beyond. The corridors of the derelict hotel were dark and labyrinthine, illuminated only by sporadic, flickering lights that cast long, accusing shadows on the walls. Behind me, shouts and the clamor of pursuit urged me onward. Navigating the maze-like hallways, I relied on instinct and memory of the building's layout. I ducked into a storage closet, slamming the door behind me and taking a moment to steady my breathing. The ache in my shoulder pulsed like a metronome of impending defeat, yet the weight of Raven's evidence in my pocket galvanized my determination. I knew that every moment I hesitated could mean the difference between life and death, and between further subjugation to those monstrous figures pulling the strings from the shadows. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Vincent with a hushed urgency. "I'm compromised," I whispered into the receiver, my voice strained but resolute. "They've ambushed the safe house. I have the evidence. but I need extraction, and now, more than ever, I need answers. Vincent's voice crackled in response, promising help and instructing me to hold tight as he coordinated a pickup. The plan was rapidly morphing. What began as a personal vendetta was now entwined with a dangerous mission to expose a conspiracy that had ensnared us both. I left the closet with silent caution, each footstep a prayer for stealth. In the narrow corridor, I encountered a lone guard, a man too young and frightened to command the room. Without a second thought, I subdued him with a swift, brutal move. I dragged him into a shadowed alcove, making sure he would be unable to raise the alarm again. The brutality of the act sent a shiver down my spine, a grim reminder of the lengths I was forced to go to in order to survive. My escape route now clear, I made my way toward a service exit I remembered from past reconnaissance. Every twist of the corridor was fraught with danger, every creak of old with threatened exposure. The sound of boots and shouts echoed in the distance. My pursuers were relentless. I moved with the precision of a cornered animal, merging instinct with the razor-sharp focus of someone who had nothing left to lose. Outside, the rain had begun to fall again, heavy droplets transforming the pavement into a slick, glistening canvas. I plunged into the downpour, the cold rain masking the scent of blood and sweat. Behind me, chaos reigned inside the hotel, but the night's darkness and the relentless rain provided cover. I sprinted through the deserted alleyways, every step bringing me closer to the rendezvous point Vincent had promised, a nondescript van parked in a forgotten lot, its engine idling in anticipation. As I reached the vehicle, I collapsed against its door, the world momentarily fading as exhaustion and pain overwhelmed me. Vincent was already there, his face grim beneath a weathered cap. Without exchanging much, he helped me into the back of the van and quickly drove off, leaving behind the shattered edifice of our last confrontation. In the cramped confines of the vehicle, as the city blurred past in streaks of rain and neon, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The adrenaline began to subside, and the reality of my injuries seeped in. But there was no time to rest. Vincent's eyes, though shadowed with concern, burned with determination. "We've got to move quickly," he said. "They're going to close in on us, and if we don't expose Hawk's network soon, you and I will be next." Clutching the envelope, I recounted every detail of the ambush, every fragment of evidence, and every whispered secret that had led me to this point. Vincent's mind raced as he processed the implications. A conspiracy of unimaginable scale, a betrayal that went far beyond the realm of a failed marriage. The revelation that Mara was merely a pawn in a far larger game provided little solace, but it steeled our resolve. Now, with the evidence secure and Vincent's contacts on the move, the final act of this dark drama was poised to unfold. The ambush had only deepened the stakes. It was a signal that the cabal was desperate, and in their desperation, mistakes would be made. Mistakes that I intended to exploit. With the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the van's roof and the city's neon glow promising secrets in every shadow, I vowed to push forward. The battle for truth had entered a new, blood-soaked phase. A war that would force every puppeteer to reveal themselves, one way or another. And as the van merged into the labyrinthine network of darkened streets, I knew that this night would not mark the end, but rather the prelude to a reckoning that would leave no one unscathed.